All right, welcome back. MLP Unpacked episode numero dos, number two. People like the pilot enough to where I figured let's just keep this rolling. And today got another awesome guest with me, Mr. Ted Moscovitz of the Texas Rangers. What's up, my guy?
Hey, good to be here, Samin. How you doing?
I'm awesome. It's Friday. I played pickleball this morning. I whooped up on
Nice.
Julio from the Florida Smash. For those that don't know, he's one of the owners. It was a good feeling. But let's talk a little bit about MLP. And before we go into Kansas City and Salt Lake and the waiver wire, I think it's worth spending a little bit of time on just you and the Texas Ranchers. And, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the most followed team on Instagram, the Texas Ranchers. But give us a little background, Ted. Like, who are you? How'd you get into pickleball? How'd you get introduced? I think you were, kind of one of the entrants into the space last year. But give us a little background there.
For sure. Yeah, I think I'm one of the last people you would expect to be, running a pro sports team because I'm not a traditional sports guy by any means. Like, I grew up playing a lot, but, no relationship with like pro sports or anything like that. My background, I've done a bunch of different things. I started my career working in the Senate, doing like foreign policy, defense, intelligence kind of work. Then I was doing kind of international development for celebrity portfolios. Went to law school, became an attorney, was doing securities law at the SEC, and corporation finance, doing like IPOs for tech companies and things like that. And then just frankly got like kind of bored being an attorney and being in a room by myself all day and pushing papers and decided I wanted to really build something. So teamed up with a mentor of mine, built a software company, sold that, then started kind of like a incubator accelerator for software companies. But really, the majority of my career has been in early stage investing, venture capital. I've been running a fund with one of my best friends since 2016, somewhere around there, doing transformative tech and really sort of just, asking this question of like, how do we use technology to benefit humanity? That intersection of tech and impact and building things that we think really matter in a few different areas. Also built a CPG business along the way and things like that. But really no sports background per se. And started playing pickleball during COVID, had a young baby, just needed to get out of the house, fell in love with the sport the first time I played, got absolutely worked by these two guys who were definitely like late 70s, early 80s, just destroyed by them and had a humbling experience. I was like, okay, this is something I sort of want for myself. And started with a WhatsApp group for some friends to find games in my local area, started to grow and became kind of the biggest pickleball community, in my area in South Austin. And that's how I met Evan, who's the founder of the Ranchers, the CEO, who pulled me in to help out because we have this unique vision for what a pro sports team could be. A lot of my career has been building in parallel to traditional systems and showing different ways of doing things. And so we kind of asked this question, like, if you were starting from scratch, building out the ideal ownership group for a pro sports team, what would that look like? And so we, had a relationship with Tim Klitsch, who was the owner of the Ranchers. And when all these kind of big name owners started to come into the sport, I think Tim realized that, some new blood was needed in an organization to really take things to the next level. And Evan and I were really eager to kind of show there was a different way of doing things in pro sports. And so we started to put the Ranchers together, and we can talk a little bit more about sort of like our philosophy behind the team building and stuff like that if you want.
No, that's great. I mean, you hit on two things that one, I just like love about our sport. The first is, and this is kind of a running joke, I used to work at the NBA. It's nothing but attorneys. So maybe we're adopting a little bit of that, becoming a more legitimate league as we speak. But more so the fact that while all of us have gotten introduced to this sport, I would say in kind of unique ways. I found it in the NBA bubble, where you saw all these videos of referees and players playing pickleball, and I was on the ground sort of operating and helping, stand that up. And it was amazing because I saw like how this sport could bring people together, and it always, sat in the back of my mind. And then when I had the chance to pitch Rich and Kevin Durant coming off of, an amazing Team USA basketball dub, got to shout that out. And they, recognized it right away, and we've leaned in since. It sounds like your story is slightly different, but still comes from that community centric. It brings people together. There's something here. And I think both of us really, really strongly believe the fact that this is going to be a huge sport, and especially at the professional level. And it's really just a matter of time, in my opinion, until we get there.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that community aspect is really what it's all about. Like, met some of my best friends, on the court, and a lot of my professional background and what I was investing in was sort of like decentralization, democratization of finance, and things like that. And that's what we've tried to apply here, with the ranchers. Like, we look a lot different from a typical pro sports ownership group, right? Which I think is usually like one wealthy family, typically older, typically white. And we have an ownership group that is really big, that draws from, not just sports, but like media, entertainment, celebrity, community building, things like that. And we have a lot of people with a really small ownership stake who are all working together to try to build the ranchers, as one, right? Also, all of our employees have meaningful equity in the team. Like, we want these people to feel like owners and to treat like owners, which I think is really cool. So, it kind of comes from Evan's background and mine of like, how do you align incentives between everyone in a system? And in this case, the fans are the ones who bring value to teams. And that's part of our long-term plan, is making, the team owned by the fans, right? And having the people who bring value be the ones who own it. So yeah, we're excited about what we've done so far, and, where it's all going as well.
So let's talk a little bit about, kind of the tiers that are involved in your organization. So you mentioned, I'd love to know a little bit more on who are those owners. I know some of them have big splashy names, so let's shout it out. But more so, what's the staff? What's the organization? Like, who are the people that are running the ranchers?
Yeah, so we have 5 full-time people now. So there's Evan, who's the CEO, who does like everything, big picture vision, brand direction, like marketing kind of stuff. I'm his co-founder in it, and I do like everything kind of MLP, league related, legal stuff, business strategy, deal making, like all that, type of thing. And then we have a woman who we just hired named Cherry, who's amazing, who's doing like community and events for us, because we've realized that's such a big part of what's going to propel the team forward, right? Like, we spend a lot of time thinking about how do you go from never held a paddle to rancher superfan, right? And sort of what's that funnel look like? And so that's what we're really starting to prioritize now, is like total entry level to the sport, then moving someone up to like taking a clinic, right? Then coming to an event in person, signing up for their first tournament, falling in love with the ranchers, coming to MLP. And so we have this kind of like very startup-y mentality of like, what's the acquisition funnel look like? But the goal is take people from zero to like rancher super fans, right? Because I think we take for granted that people who play pickleball know anything about the pro game, which, we've realized most of them don't, right? Like, if I go to my local rec court, like, no one knows who Ben Johns is, right? Like, imagine you go to your local basketball court, like no one's heard of LeBron. Like, that's kind of where we are, I think, in the ecosystem. Then we have this woman, Alex, who's our chief of staff, keeps all the trains running on time, is, the adult in the room for us. And then Pierre, who does partnerships and sponsorships. He came from 16 years at Red Bull, like essentially doing that. And so he's the one who, onboards, sponsors, partners, keeps everyone happy, does delivery of things like that. And then we have like these 2 incredible women who do the like video shooting and content and things like that for us. So that's kind of what the organization looks like from the who's running it perspective. Tim Klitsch is the original founder of the team. He's stepped back more over time. He's doing like some really cool stuff in Austin with pickleball facilities and things like that. So he's been, a leader in the organization for a long time, as a great resource for us, but not as much in the day-to-day. But he'll always be the godfather of the ranchers, to us for sure.
I love that. I mean, well, there's 2 things there, which is, one, investing in your team and your brand and your organization. I would say for you guys, almost more so than any other team, has like truly played dividends. Like, you have an incredible merch, you have a huge social following. I see what you guys are doing locally. You're hosting camps, you're hosting clinics, you're building facilities. Like, it's amazing. I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out Tim Klitsch's son, Matty Pickles, MLP super fan. Yeah, best short form video guy that I know. No doubt. And tell us a little bit about the on the court staff, like who is kind of making the decision making around the 4 players that represent the Rangers.
Yeah, so Ryan DeWidgeon, aka Pickleball, is the coach. I think the way we have things structured is a little different from other teams, where you sometimes have a GM that has more of a coaching role. Ryan is really just first and foremost like coach, right? Like, draft and everything on court performance, but doesn't have like a GM kind of business role, right? It's pretty bifurcated. So, I would say though, like Evan and I love the game. We play, we watch a lot of it. We think we have helpful input sometimes for Ryan on things. So like, I like to think that we're very active, we're at the matches and we're talking to players and we're doing that thing too. But Ryan for sure, like is the one who's really leading that effort. He just has such good relationships with other pros, which I think is one of the reasons that we drafted really well is he's playing with these people every day. And he just asks them like, I don't mind talking a bit about our strategy, which is essentially, I think everyone knows who the top premier players are. We ask this question of like, who are the people that are just outside of that first tier, but who have the potential to rise up, given that we have longer term contracts now. And so I think with Christian and with Etta as our first male, first female pick, we nailed that. And then Tina was one of these people who, when we asked pros, like, who is really underrated? Who would you want to play with if your partner dropped out? Her name kind of kept coming up. And this is, I think, like the secret to MLP is having, a third or fourth round pick who plays like a first round pick. And I think she's absolutely done that so far. So, credit to Ryan for finding that talent for sure.
I think you nailed it. The strategy to winning MLP is that, which is how do you take someone that was drafted in the 30s, 40s and elevate them and give them the opportunity to perform like a top 10 player, because that's what sets the top tier apart really from the middle. And I think what's amazing is you see that really across other professional sports leagues in that, yes, of course, like Tom Brady or LeBron or Kevin Durant or Steph would be amazing to have on your team. Yeah. But you look at an organization like the Boston Celtics, who drafted Jason Tatum and drafted Jaylen Brown and had this incredible, run with them, but weren't able to truly break through. And then they go and grab a Drew Holiday and a Derek White, and now all of a sudden they're, top of the league, go on to win a championship, and those players have elevated the ceiling on that team, even though they had those established stars, but they don't have the LeBrons or the Jokic's of the world. Yeah. So,
and then the chemistry piece, right? Like, it's so important. Like, I think people talk about it in MLP, but they don't realize how much it really matters. Like, our team likes hanging out together. Like, we have dinners together. We do things off court. Like, the chemistry is really important. But more than that is, like, you have to draft for coachability. Like, you have to draft people with low ego who are willing to take feedback and change their game and who are adaptable. And that's one of the things I think we've done really well. I mean, our players have been asked to play right side, left side. We changed our mix pairings. Like, match to match, you may be in a different position with a different partner. And it gives us a lot of flexibility that I think other teams don't have. But the most important thing is just everyone is willing to learn and improve their game. And that's, I think, a credit to a lot of the success we've had.
You bring up a really interesting point that I want to dive into for a second, which is it seems like there's a distinct difference in the strategic advantages behind what you just described of the flexibility of your roster, which is to say all four of your players could switch sides, you could switch mixed pairings, and it could work. I actually have a completely opposite view on the strategy, specifically for Challenger, in that role definition is key. That you need a right side guy to know he's the right side guy pairing with this left side guy, and in mixed, this is, these are our pairings. And I believe a part of it is the role definition at least at the Challenger level helps build chemistry and sort of trust, and you're getting the same reps in. I do think at Premier you have to be a bit more dynamic. And so have you guys switched have they switched sides middle of the match? Have you guys switched pairings match to match? Like, that's been a part of what you've done?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it depends on who you draft, right? Like, you have to have the right players to be able to do that, So for example, like Christian Alston, right?
Tell us your full roster, actually. I should maybe assume that.
Yeah, like your first pick, you think is this big, superstar left side player, but Christian had such an amazing history, on the right. Like, he's a top right side player, in past seasons, like winning championships and things like that. Like, both Challenger then coming up to Premier has shown he's so good in that role. And so, sometimes it makes sense to have him there, right? With Quang coming in and being a little bit newer and needing to gain comfort, he, I think, was a bit more inclined to be like a left side player, maybe early on, huge forehand, but then has really developed some of the other shots and now is more comfortable on the right. And so depending on who's across from you, we might want to switch it up, right? Like, our match against Columbus is a great one. It's like, who do you want standing across from Newman, right? Like, maybe that's a little bit different from, where you would be with other teams. And then similarly, for mixed, like, there are times where we want Christian and Tina, and there are times where we want Christian and Etta, depending on, who we're matching up against. As Quang continues to get better, it gives us even more flexibility there, to where like he can play like an A player, So it depends on who you. I think it's kind of unique to us. I don't know if it would work for everyone, but it has been working for us so far, I think, and we're grateful for that.
That makes a ton of sense. And honestly, we have to dive into the Quang piece of this because, in my opinion, you and the Texas Rangers made the riskiest move in all of Major League Pickleball history from a roster standpoint by essentially trading Pablo to us, coincidentally, and picking up someone who not only didn't get drafted in Premier, but also didn't get drafted in Challenger.
Never played real mixed at the pro level, no doubles.
I mean, I look back, like I looked at all of the different roster changes that teams have made. Now the rules were slightly different, but no one has made a bigger move than what you guys did. And first, like, it's worth mentioning, Pablo is no slouch. Like, he's on our team. He's incredible. The guy is continuously getting better. He made a PPA final with Hayden. Like, it wasn't like we're bailing out early on someone who's maybe hit their ceiling, which I think makes this move even more interesting because I genuinely believe Pablo is just getting better and better and better and better. But, how did you guys look at the landscape and sort of come to the decision that you did around Quang?
Yeah, I mean, Pablo is an amazing player. Like, we have so much love for him as an organization and me personally. Like, he's just a good person and absolutely, a top tier player, right? I mean, just looking at the podiums he's had, on PPA, like, it was the hardest thing I think I've had to do professionally, like definitely within MLP. But for us, the goal is win a championship, right? And we just felt like there wasn't the right chemistry there in the mixed pairings, especially for that team to be consistently winning, right? And so we knew we had to do something, and it was a huge risk that for sure could have gone either way. But we were like, you know what? The way the team's constructed right now, like, it doesn't have as much to do with Pablo as like the mix of everything. We just didn't think we were going to win the championship this year. And so we said, you know what, like, let's roll the dice because it's first place or nothing for us. Like, that's kind of been our perspective.
That's amazing. And I was looking through the history books to try and find the right analogy here in other sports. And there were two moves that stood out to me, which, one is a bit hyperbole, but whatever. Tom Brady over Drew Bledsoe. Like, let's just be honest about it. Bill Belichick, made the decision in the middle of the season to run with a rookie 6th round draft pick in Tom Brady. And obviously he's gone on to have the greatest career of all time. Like, I hope that's the case for Quang. Well, maybe as a competitor, I maybe hope that's not the case for Quang. But the other one I think that maybe fits what you guys are doing a little bit more that I thought was really compelling is if you remember the Boston Celtics with Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen and Paul Pierce, and they handed the keys to Rajon Rondo, who was, a super young player. I can't remember if he was a rookie or second year at the time. And they said, we think you have the ability to be the starting point guard on a championship caliber team and raise our ceiling to where we need to be and be surrounded by, these 3 other stars, which you guys kind of have. You have Tina and Etta and Christian, who are, like, not necessarily veterans of the game, but very, very much so established players of the game. And you handed the keys to someone who feels, younger, newer to the sport. So I think that's incredible. And I'm kind of curious if any of those.
And work ethic, like, that'll go a long way, like, he's someone who had such good, footwork and technical and like kind of the mechanics of the game, but who is just so willing to learn and who trains so hard. I mean, I don't think anyone's putting as much time on the court and development as he is, and we just have been really pleased with how he's stepped up and learned to play a mix. And we just saw this kind of thing that was this amazing, person who we could mold a little bit to play the mix game. And yeah, listen, it's paid off, right? Like, it was a big risk, but we think it's gone really well. And that, the other 3 players on the team have been just so amazing as teammates and, coaches for him and helping him to develop. He's just like really an amazing young man who we're really proud of. And, it's been something that's worked out, for us well. And then the other half of this thing was like, it was just so important to us that if we were going to drop Pavel, he would have a really good home. And the fact that you guys were in first place and we knew like he's going to be in Premier next year was just a really key kind of factor for us, as well, knowing like he was going to go somewhere that he'd be appreciated and that he'd be back in Premier a year later.
Oh, we're coming, and we're coming for blood when we play you guys next year. Just remember that.
All right, excited to see it.
But in honesty, the on-court results also just have been incredible, right? Like you guys, I would argue, were the hottest team over the last 8 to 10 weeks. Third place finish in the midseason tournament, and then went on, I think, a 7-game win streak, if I'm not mistaken, or 7-match win streak.
We won 9 of our last. So, like going into Kansas City, we had won 9 of the last 11 matches. One of which was a dream breaker loss to the Fives, which was close. Like could have gone either way. If we look at the team since we added Quang like full time at the midseason tournament, we averaged 2.54 points per game, which puts us well above any other team. I mean, we'd be in first place just looking at that kind of snippet of the season. Some people would say the midseason tournament like doesn't really count, but we played teams who were at full roster in it. And so I wish we had the points from those. But yeah, we feel really good about, the trajectory that we're on right now. I think some teams started really hot and have been slowing down a little bit. We maybe started a little bit slower, but, we're just getting better and better. So yeah, we think we've got a championship team for sure.
Yeah, and what's been fun for the sport is now we've got kind of a 3-horse race for 2 seeds in the playoffs. And Ryan and I talked about this on our last episode, and I think it's worth just clarifying for fans because we got some inbound here. The top 2 seeds in Premier have a bye into the semifinals. So extremely valuable. You don't have to play that wild card round with teams 3, 4, 5, and 6. And it does feel like, at least as the standings currently sit, there's 3 teams that are truly vying for that spot. Though I would argue there's maybe 1 or 2 just behind you with a few matches to go, or a few less matches played that might be able to catch you. Has your team talked about that at all? Have you guys talked? Do the players know what a top 2 seed means? Like, how are you sort of thinking about the playoffs, given you've played 18 of your 23 regular season matches at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it is so hard for us to sit here now watching these next 2 events that we're not in and seeing teams, essentially catch up with us, right? There's a challenge there, for sure. I'll say, there's comfort in knowing that we're 1 win away. We're actually 1 point away from locking a playoff spot. We've got 5 matches to go. So for us, like playoffs locked, right? Now the new prize is those top 2 seeds, or even the 3rd seed, has a huge advantage with the way the playoffs are structured and, having some choice and things like that. So, we know like we need to be in one of those top 3 positions, but ultimately what can we do but play really well, which we are doing. And so, it's like, stay the course, play as well as we're playing, and get one of those top spots. The other thing too is like we fundamentally believe that we can beat any team out there, right? So, I think we're going to have one of those top seeds going to the playoffs. But if we don't, like, we can beat anyone. We'll earn our way through if we need to, right? Just like we did in the midseason. Beating big teams to get that 3rd place, right, including Dallas. So, we'll continue on kind of the course that we're on right now, and that's the best that we can do. But
yeah,
that said,
I love that.
I do think there are teams who have the potential to come up. Like, I would not count out DC or the Fives yet. The teams that have played the most matches happen to be the top teams. And I think there's part of that, which is a chemistry thing, which is the more on-court time you get together, the better the team is going to play. So I think some people think like, oh, it's kind of a 3-way race right now. I could see either DC or the Fives, having a great run through the next 2 events and kind of being up there at the top as well. So we'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah, and what's fun about the structure that we have is you, the Flash, the Shock have played, a majority of your matches. I think all 3 of you have 1 event left, which means the, DC and the Hustlers won't be playing you guys at this next event in MLP New York. And so we're going to get and walk out of that event with a very clear understanding of, is this 6 teams jockeying for playoff position? Yeah. Or did someone catch up and now we're, fighting for playoff positioning and the top 2 seeds? Those are the things that, make pro sports just absolutely incredible. And I do feel like the end of the season is going to be incredibly dramatic because every game you're going to see teams go from 3 to 2 or 2 to 1 or 4 to 5. Like
Yeah.
there's meaning to every single slot, 1 through 6. And as a result, you're really going to be fighting hard. In my opinion, teams are going to be fighting really, really hard to try and position themselves for success.
Yeah, I mean, that sixth spot is a really interesting one. I think coming out of Kansas City, like, I think we know who 5 teams are going to be that are in the playoffs. Like, the top 5 teams are all within 1/4 average point per game of each other. But then if you go from 5th to 7th, it's 3/4 of a point per game average difference, which is a huge drop off, right? And so, I guess there's a couple of teams kind of gunning for that 6th spot, and we'll see how they do. But I think we kind of know like who the majority of playoff teams are, at least probably 5 of the spots. But man, those seeds are so important that, like you said, there's so much drama now coming into the rest of it that is really exciting. And it's nice that I'm going to get to watch some of that from the sidelines over these next couple of events and not have to be in it so much. But we're also excited to get back on the court, and Vegas is our next event.
Yeah, I love that. And so when I was doing this with Ryan last week, we talked about how this is the hardest trophy in pro pickleball to win, and what that means for a player's legacy, and where they would be evaluated. The thing that we didn't get to talk about that I'm almost curious to bring to you is, what does it mean for an organization? Like, you've built this and you've invested in this and you have this incredible staff. If you, at the Texas Rangers, win the most difficult trophy to win in pro pickleball, what are we doing to celebrate, and where's this thing going?
Oh man. I mean, first, we're taking it 1 week at a time, right? Like, you focus on process, to get the results. So I don't know that I've really put myself in that place of like holding the trophy yet. At the same time, I'm someone who really sort of believes in that power of belief, and you better believe that, leading into the championship, we'll do some visualization exercises with the team and have them just really like feel into it and embody like what it would be like to hoist that trophy, right? Yeah, I think you'll have to ask me that as we're a little bit closer, to Dallas and Orlando. It hasn't really entered in my consciousness yet, but like, I can answer the question in some sense, which is it would be a huge validation of everything that we've done so far, right? Like the way that we've built out the organization and how much time and attention we put into like our storytelling and our media, and trying to build fandom and things like that. It's a great proof point for how we drafted. I mean, we were consistently rated like probably near the bottom, right, of a lot of people's kind of initial draft prognostications. And so, it'll feel good to prove everybody wrong, right? For sure. And, it'll be just, a great proof point from that sense, but then also, kind of how we've built the organization around and things too. So yeah, it would be amazing, no doubt.
Yeah. No, I mean, I haven't gotten there either. And there's sort of this added element with challenger teams of the opportunity to move up into premier, and someone like myself who talked to our ownership group and said, give me a shot. Like, let's start in challenger. Let's pocket the dollars. I think I can get us up. I feel good about, our ability to do so. We've got a lot of season left. Our team has played 8 regular season matches out of 23. We've got 15 more to go, 3 more events. So a lot of time. And what's funny to see is the who you're playing and who you're competing against in challenger seems to change every week. I mean, you've got tinkering. I know, you guys are up in premier, so I'm curious, have you paid much attention to that? Do you guys think about that at all? Like, how is sort of those moves? I mean, we've had a few trades now where Blaine Hovenier, who I just, I have nothing but good things to say about what he did with the Mad Drops. I mentioned this in our last episode, and I'm hopeful that Thomas, is healthy and is coming back, and Blaine getting traded to the Night Owls sort of indicates at least some of that. But now Blaine's in challenger. You had the Bouncers trade for Susanna Barr. You just had breaking news. The Vegas Night Owls trade for Rafa Hewitt. So how much attention do you pay to some of that? Do you have your eye on those types of things? Like, what intrigues you there?
Oh yeah. I mean, so first, like, we have such a deep love of the game and love of MLP. I mean, before I even was an owner of a team, right? Like, I was a huge fan, And so just from that perspective and loving the game, like, we pay attention, right? But then from the Rangers' perspective, it's critically important, to see the moves being made on the board. I mean, the really sad reality for us is one of the players on our team we're not going to have next year, It was a little bit easier for us because it was defined that Quang are going to have to give up, right? I would love to draft him again next season. Like, if that works out for us, we would have him again in a heartbeat. But that's not a lock for us necessarily, right? He's an amazing player whose stock has gone up so much through us. I think there are going to be a lot of teams, vying for him. And so we're looking at, okay, like who is a potential replacement? And so we're watching the games closely. We're watching the trades closely. We're trying to kind of figure out the chess of like, okay, who's the most likely player to be given up by the teams, that exist right now in both Premier and Challenger, who would be a good fit for us. And so, yeah, I'd say we're definitely paying a lot of attention to it. And then also like, I just have so many friends now, who are owners and GMs and folks like you and so many other teams who I'm like rooting for and who I'm excited for. And so I pay attention, from that perspective as well. So I can be bought in with all these people who, I really care about.
Yeah, it's moments like this that continuously give me so much optimism about the future of our sport, because I feel like we're in this time window where we get to grab the best things that we've seen work for these established sports leagues and bring them into our ecosystem. Like we've effectively have 3 trade deadlines by having the waiver wire set up the way it is, where you see these peaks in interest for the NBA and Major League Baseball around the trade deadline, where players are moving and teams are tinkering, and we've kind of been able to build that within our league and have those sort of peaks and opportunities of hopefully interest coming in from fans multiple times. And then we've got now this regular season and playoff structure, which I think will sort of continue to ideate and evolve around. And we had the midseason tournament, and I think there's a bundle of opportunities for us to continue doing fun and innovative things. But I just love the puzzle of grabbing what other leagues have done that truly, truly works and fans show interest in, and bringing them into our sport.
Oh, for sure. I mean, credit to you and the rest of the folks, in MLP leadership who are working on things like schedule and rules and things like that. I think everyone's done a really good job of kind of keeping that excitement high, of pulling from other sports, taking the best elements and creating a product that is like truly one of the most exciting things, in pro sports, both from like a structure perspective and people watching from the outside, but then people coming to the matches. I mean, all my friends who I convinced to come and watch this crazy pickleball thing that I'm doing don't realize what they're walking into. They come to an MLP and they're just like, oh my gosh, like this is so exciting. Like this is the most exciting sporting event that I can ever remember being to. So yeah, props to you guys for building it out the way that you have. And we know it's only going to get better.
Yeah, and shout out MLP New York, September 19th to 22nd. We're going to Virginia Beach the week after, MLP Miami, Vegas. I mean, we're only halfway through the season, and it's been honestly exhilarating. And so I'm excited to continue that for the rest of the year, and the playoffs in November. I mean, I know you're not looking at it. I haven't really had a chance to think too much or manifest it ourselves, given the fact that we're still, heads down on the regular season, but it's going to be incredible. So
yeah, especially being in Texas, for us, like
that's
it's
true.
a few hours
backyard.
away. We're gonna have a lot of friends, a lot of fans there. Yeah, we're really excited.
Love it. Well, Ted, thank you for coming on the second episode of MLP Unpacked and just really giving your insight on everything you brought really to your organization, but I would say to the league as well. You're a leader in what your team is doing. I'm eyeing that social media number, and I'm gunning for it, especially as we move up to Premier. So those things only help us grow.
Yeah, we appreciate it, man. I mean, listen, in some ways, I do think we're a leader in the league, and in some ways we have so much to learn from all these other team owners who have so much experience in this sport. Like, it's really cool to be able to learn from these people and to grow alongside them and to help build out, what I think is the most exciting sport that exists right now.
Love it. All right. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Take care, buddy.